Welcome everyone. Today we have our another new episode and we will discuss on Web3. We have our world famous speaker, Mr. Eric and Professor David Smith. First, I would like to give chance, Mr. Eric.
The internet is, to me, a search for a couple things: accessibility, integration, and as we go toward this idea of what do we access, what can we access, what do we integrate, and how do we communicate with all that? It kind of started with this idea of, gee, I wish I could get your data instead of mailing you a hard drive like we used to do. Here's my data. I'll send you a hard drive. And maybe a week later, you could plug it in and send the drive back to me. We got this thing where we could connect the internet up and say, well, great, here's my address, come get it. And that was a big advance. And then we went and, in addition to connecting all the networks together in the internet, we built the World Wide Web on top of it, which meant we put in a postal system where people could have an address and you could find them just by putting the address down. You didn't have to know where it was or where it was located geographically. The network would take care of it. And that meant not only could you share data, you could share information. You could find it, you could search for it. The next step in the web idea was you could share applications. In other words, the cloud computing power and the data centers. You could now say, not only will I share my data, my information with you, you can run my application. I will give you the ability to run my application, even using my resources. And so from then, it's just this whole idea of how do we make things easier, reduce friction to connect, and how do we integrate everything? So wouldn't it be great if, here we are right now, we're using StreamYard, why can't we go add Google Drive and add a document right there and a PowerPoint and financial statements from QuickBooks and whatever we want? I mean, we're kind of making advancements in that right now, because as we're talking, we can go over YouTube and Roku and Facebook and just right now. So Web 3.0 says, how do we start making it integrate more things in and integrate it? Now, there's always a push by people that own some of these markets to say, no, I believe that you should only connect with me and buy everything from me. Like if you look, you should go to my store, buy products from me over my internet using my devices. It'd be nice if everything you did, anything, would be in my pocket. But, as we do that, I notice that I can go get my, Alexa could access, for example, my Apple Music. I'm sure Alexa would rather you didn't, but that's kind of how things are going now. So that gives us two things. What do we make accessible? And two, how do we protect on that? Because right now, the Web 3.0's big push is on privacy. When I was chief strategy officer for a marketing agency, we could pretty much track everything anybody did, how many times you opened an email, whether you opened it, what you did with it. So companies like Entreport are not quite happy with the fact that they can no longer give you those statistics. So privacy comes up, but now with the speed and the ease that anybody can become a voice. For example, if we wanted to do a harassment campaign, we can recruit people, get bots, open multiple accounts, and just a few accounts can go out and say something really good or something really bad, but it puts a lot of power. So how do you, to me, one of the biggest things is, besides the integration, is where does truth come from these days? How do you find truth? We're seeing a lot of that with Elon Musk right now. Who are we going to, I like these journalists, but I don't like those journalists. So who decides who lets people talk, and how do you tell if what somebody says is the truth? For example, I know during our presidential elections, there was websites with newspapers and articles. The articles were fake. The newspaper that it was printed in was just a website somebody set up that didn't exist 2 weeks before. So I think probably truth and privacy are our biggest challenges right now under Web 3.0. And our biggest advantages is the ability to make more and more things easy, be able to access more things and integrate things together. But I'm sure David has a lot more detailed information.
Thank you. Thank you. Professor David Smith, what you want to add for today's discussion?
Eric, I loved how you started there with the differences, because I think those are some of the key points. And to me, it's very interesting in that if you go back and look as you went through what Web 1.0, 2.0, and what 3.0 is becoming, it's very clear right now that Web 3.0 has many different meanings right now and is trying to figure out what it is. And we also know it's built upon the existing core ideas of decentralization, openness, and really the excellent web utility that has been out there and what can be done. Also, as we begin to look at Web 3.0, we're seeing that there's still a lot of hype in it, and it's beginning to go, but we'll see it's also being allowed more sophisticated and much more advanced interaction between devices and the users. The Internet of Things, cloud computing, the ability for the physical world and the digital world to enact are a lot of what Web 3.0 is going to be in. We're seeing these terms kind of beginning to use also with the semantic web, which is where machine readable data is being created with something called a resource description framework that can be used as Web 3.0. The other things that we see is that Web 3.0, in addition to having much more devices on it and how it could be, we see that the gaming industry is very excited about the move. But, it's really trying to connect the real world and the virtual world. And some of the characteristics are going to be user-based services, increased decentralization, moving more and more out of pure data centers to edge of cloud and other applications. It's much more user involved, where Web 1.0 and 2.0 were more corporate involvement. Web 3.0, much more user. A lot of increased artificial intelligence happening into it. In the area of trust, security, privacy, it's working through various different ways to handle those challenges that we have, particularly in Web 2.0. So they're looking at things of decentralized wallets, looking at increased use of blockchain technology, not the first generation blockchain, but really the second generation and going further. And you will see Web 3.0 involve more digital currencies of very different types. One of the main Web 3.0 projects out there is being run by Ethereum right now. And you're going to see a lot more projects built around that. You see things like the Sandbox are trying to build huge metaverses built on Web 3.0 technology. And you're seeing these begin to work a lot, and the changes to it. But to me, this is a great way to begin to initially some of these concepts that Eric introduced and try to build up on them. And let's see where Jason, particularly with his emphasis on crypto, can take the Web 3.0 discussion.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Jason.
Thank you. Well, I'm at a loss of exactly what to say, truly. because it's such a big topic. So there's a lot of surface area to start on, and sort of picking a spot to start is just start. I think that it's important to understand that the timing is significant for a discussion about Web3 because it's a different architecture. Like, to me, the main difference is about login credential, where with a platform, with any platform that you're managing or running or starting, you as the platform operator provide the login account to everybody, right? Like a person shows up and they'll create a username and a password that the account that the platform is setting up for them. Where having a login credential that is your own key pair, like be crypto native, I mean, it works like Keybase. And there's a good example, like a way to log into Zoom itself. You can log in with SSO, right? Create an account called Keybase. You can create your own backup seed phrase with your own keys, and you can use that around the internet to log in different places at places that did not provide those keys to you. You got them yourself, and that's more secure. So that's a pretty simple sort of architectural change, and it makes the whole thing crypto native. But at the same time as that, the timing is so sensitive because at the same time as that, there is this aggregate processing power that is on the vertical side of the hockey stick, like the raw processing power of the world's supercomputer, you could call it. Like Ethereum is a supercomputer, sort of, or just aggregate supply of compute is, and we don't know where it's going next. It's going so fast that 6 months from now it's an unpredictable timeline. I think it could be big or it could be small. If we don't, the volatility in that forecast is very time sensitive because of the pace and because of the competitive threshold. So there's that, and that's just a coincidence that that's happening at the same time as the popularity of Web3, which the architectural difference to Web3 is super simple. There's that, plus not just raw processing power, but the advancement of scripts that are really advanced, like ML and AI. They complement the processing power, and it just makes for a very interesting web. All in. So I hope that's useful for an introduction comment for now.
Thank you, Mr. Eric.
Well, so let's put this together.
Mr. Eric.
We kind of talked about the web, and the internet, where that's driving. But the biggest difference between, to me, Web 3.0, what's gone before, is the Web 3.0 is just locked in with Industry 4.0. I mean, you can't pull them apart anymore. That it's not, the internet is not just this tool we use, it's part of how we live. And so you take the technologies that are not only benefiting but driving Web 3.0, and that includes artificial intelligence. We talked about big data and data mining, where we know more, Internet of Things, artificial reality, cloud computing, like Jason mentioned, simulation and immersive environments, cybersecurity, 3D printing. All these technologies are coming, and the one thing they have in common is massive disruptive change. So as the web changes, business changes. As business changes and society changes, the web changes. So what does that massive change do? It drives a couple things. It drives our information, the way we talk to each other, changing a lot. It changes the way we do our cyber and physical systems, that integration between the network and everything else we do. It changes our partner networks. Anything's in logistics and that, the fact that we're partnering up right now to have this, it changes our partner networks. But the one thing that people miss a lot is it changes our workforce, both who we hire, how we hire, what we do. The workforce changes. So this massive change creates massive problems, but also creates massive opportunities, like in the areas of biological, physical, and digital. So if we got industry driving change, driving opportunity and challenges, add on top of there corporate social responsibility. The fact that we're worrying, is this Web 3.0 good or bad? And if we want it to be good, what does that mean? How do we do that? How does that fit into our social environment? And David talks a lot about this, and rightly so, is governance. How does this corporate social responsibility in those three areas, this ESG stuff, how does that drive from these opportunities? And so it creates a need for much more resilience and sustainability. Resilience, take a punch and keep going, and sustainability, are we even going to be relevant in doing this same thing? How do we keep this live stream relevance 5 years from now? It's driving that. And so that means our competitive and future value is always changing. Our organization, how we organize and our product fit is always changing. And our employee, the way we hire people, is changing. So again, we talked about industry driving change, driving challenge and opportunity, influenced by corporate social responsibility, and that driving resilience and sustainable response. So what's in the middle of all that? Education. How are we going to train people to do this? We're not just going to collect information and organize and say, I understand the basic information of this field. How do I solve problems? There's probably solutions. If we have a problem, there's probably a solution in some way or part of that out there. Now it's about finding it, putting it together, and integrating. Education becoming, in order to respond to Web 3.0, the way we teach is different. The way we learn is different. People are looking to shortcuts for lower risk, safety, capability, performance. It becomes this, give me a shortcut to harness all this stuff, and how do you train people to do it? So I guess that's a long way of saying, I think the biggest difference is we can no longer separate the internet from major parts of our lives. Web 3.0 is part of who we are, and we now have this much more symbiotic of where we go, and this change drives opportunity, challenges drives the way the world changes. Corporate social responsibility drives responsibility, resilience, sustainability. And I think how we're going to hire, train, and interact becomes this lifelong thing. Who we train, what we train them for, how we train, I think is going to be massively changed and I think it's going to be more short term than long term for that part of it.
Thank you, Professor David Smith.
Well, Eric, once again, I agree with you and add on to it. One of the things I've learned from looking at the internet, and particularly from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0, which took about 10 years to transition. And we're going to see the same type of thing here too, but because of the legacy applications, the hardware, software differences, display differences, we do know that Web 3.0 will continue to evolve incrementally. It's going to have to do that to be accessible globally. And we also see that there's a lot of new things there. I love how some of the webs have been characterized. Web 1.0 was characterized mostly as read-only. Web 2.0 was read-write. And 3.0 is being characterized as read, write, and own. So we can see even more of that. So you're seeing that Web 3.0 is, like we're saying, it's going to be more and more decentralized. And you're going to see ownership is going to get distributed more among its builders and users. And Web 3.0 will move away from some of the central permissions that you see in Web 1.0 and 2.0. And you're going to see more and more native payments begin to be used, and much more built around trying to be censorship resistant. and we'll see that becoming more and more in place. But the fact that it took 10 years to transition from Web 1.0 to 2.0, and with all the massive changes, it might even take even longer to transition to the full involved Web 3.0 that, as we have all said, is going to be really one and another with the metaverse, and how we're going to see that happen. And you're going to see the concept of DAOs really coming into authority. We've seen this as we've talked about the metaverse, as we've talked about blockchains and others. I'm sorry. DAOs are decentralized autonomous organizations. So that instead of having a central authority that governs the operation of the platform, that with a DAO, the technologies and communities will form a self-governing approach for a lot of it. And we will see that going. We will also see, though, that Web 1.0, Web 2.0 were built primarily with IPv4 addressing. And with this growth of devices and the interface between the physical world and the digital world, we will need many more addresses, which is what IPv6 provides. And IPv6 has been out there for a long time and is mostly ignored by people trying to keep on IPv4s and ways to cheat IPv4. But Web 3.0 will see IPv6 with its new addressing scheme, the other elements come into place, really accelerate more, and which will let us grow more and more what's called DApps. And DApps in Web 3.0 are decentralized applications that are built on the top of smart contracts, blockchains, and really edge of cloud computing. And we will see that really go. The other thing that we're going to see in Web 3.0 and the second and 2.5 version of blockchain is something called cross-chain bridges. And this will, under Web 3.0, let the exchange and monetary exchange begin to work some more. So you can see, if I just compare our web that we're on right now to where Web 3.0 can go, we're in change for a lot of changes. But it is going to take a while to implement all of them. It's not going to be there day one. And incremental advancement and testing is going to be one of the big things that we can count on as we go to Web 3.0. So Sharif, thank you for this part.
Thank you, Jason.
Yeah, once again, there's a lot of surface area to say, like, where should I start on that and pick up where they left off? Because I agree with sort of like the landscape they're describing and what are the features, I guess, like, is a way to say, like. But I think I wanted to get back to one of Eric's first questions about the source of truth, how to verify the original truth of a provisioner. Like, Web3 has, to David Smith's point, has the additional characteristic of and own, right? It's read and write and own. And so there's I'll give it an example, sort of like, maybe it's a bit of a frivolous example, but a lot of NFT art has some overlap with other intellectual property, right? There are some copyright issues, and we know this about memes. Like, people use sort of popular cultural figures and encapsulate that whole mood and image into a meme, and that there's an intellectual property sort of issue, and that Web3 is going to have that a lot in spades, of a person sort of scooping the content from another source and repackaging it and reselling it, even though they're not the creator of that content. They just have sort of audience access or something. And that one of the questions will be about the original, can you verify originality and how? And we'll as users of the web, we'll get used to the jargon of like proof, right? Because cryptographic proofs are like a second language, right? There's some jargon to the language of it all and knowing what you're looking at, and there's some abstracts, and not everybody needs to know. Not everybody needs to know. I think I want to say that to our audience, to whoever's listening, there's this idea out there amongst developers in our industry that we're so horizontal here that everybody will know how this all works, and they will build it together, and they will everything like that. But what I wanted to say here is that Web3 will require good sort of pillars of trust in communities, sort of a human order pillar of trust of people who know the whole jargon, people who are expert in this and can help the next generation sort of learn the jargon in a way that doesn't leave them exposed to a lot of vulnerabilities. Like, I kind of wanted to just put a pin in that illusion out there of that, a lifetime, a whole career of experience is going to be irrelevant, and everybody's going to contribute as equals here. I really feel as though there are strong advantages enjoyed by some participants, and we need to sort of let the maturity of the space sort of roll out so that we can see where the pillars of trust stand strongest to find those like sort of sources of truth for Web3. I know that's a weird note to leave off on, but I meant by that specifically reputation, oracles and reputation, and how people help each other navigate to find good proofs. Because in the world of crypto and the internet and Web3, proof, cryptographic proof, or just generalized proof is sort of like the art and science. And there's enough to know with all of that you really need to find a human expert who explains it all and stuff like that. As time passes, those reputations sort of develop and become more pronounced. That's what I'm saying there.
Okay, I'll go on. So the first round, we kind of talked about what is the infrastructure, the net, and how's that change, our infrastructure and what we can do, how we do business changes. And then we kind of circled around to, okay, but how does that change us and society and this thing, the science society part. And then what Jason was just starting to talk about, I think, is, okay, so what does that have to do with how do we operate? What are the operations if we've got these people in society? And I think one of the big trends is that people are running toward their own networks. In other words, the network becomes a thing. It used to be, you go to your tribe and then your church, and then that kind of came up to where you went to government. And now a lot of people are not quite as happy with government, and they're saying, well, I'm going to spend time talking to David Smith and Jason McKee because I like those conversations better. And that kind of becomes this entity. So you have people that are creating networks that focus on preventing human trafficking and take care of animals, and on the latest game or books they like to read, or following some star, or even these political networks where instead of it becomes about the governance itself, it becomes about one person, and you follow them and you talk about that. And you see these networks formed right now for a lot of things. And, then you get things like QAnon, which comes this network where, you don't even know who's in charge of what, but there's somebody doing something. And yet, this is where people live. So I think as people start identifying more with their networks, that provides some big advantages, but it can also be pretty scary because is your network trustworthy? Again, it comes back to this idea of truth. Is how do you know truth? Because people have been blurring the lines between a fact and an opinion. It'd be nice using AI and all that to say, wait a minute, this is an opinion. No, that's not a fact. So, you take like the latest pandemic and people talk about, vaccines versus ivermectin, whatever your opinions on that, people will say stuff all the time. You hear it that just, where'd you get that? Well, I heard from somebody who heard from somebody, or I think, and it's stated as fact. And so I think we start moving more to, networks that become part of our identity. We can be part of more than one networks that are focused for specific things. And then then there's that clash between these networks and your local communities and government. So I think the ability to move and live in the network is both a good thing, because that, like right now with the World Talent Economy Forum, here's this network that we can go in and contribute to developing countries. And within this network, we're putting the World Talent Economy Forum offices in the Center for Governance and the Alien World Federation Planet of IT. I mean, these are things that we can just do. And so as you start seeing our networks come into conflict with business and governance, working out that, I think, is going to be non-trivial and a big deal, because there's always that balance between control. Couldn't we do everything if we could all move in the same direction? And the other side of that is agility. Wouldn't it be great if we could just go do stuff together? And our networks in Web 3.0 allow us to connect and start doing things together and do it quickly. It used to be you had to get, especially in terms of software, when I did government projects, oh, gee, we need $10 million to do anything. Oh, we need $10,000 to prototype something. That money still needs to be in there as we move forward to things like quantum computing. But in the other part of that is that some things, we're building this website and do that. We got together and decide on that, in an hour. And we built a foundation together in a group in that time. So, going on this idea of here's this great infrastructure that's growing, it's connecting, here's how it's fitting into our society, and here is how people are moving in a decentralized way. And that means that we can also share search engines. Do we need Google to store and be the center house and Bing? Yeah, that's helpful, but the potential exists to say, if I need something and it's on David's computer and he allows me access to it, or one of his servers, why can't I just find it, get it? Why would I have to go through Google? And so as we start changing the network of what search is, and finding things, even things like Elasticsearch, it changes the way these networks work. And I'm sure we're going to butt heads in terms of standards and law to make this happen. It's both wonderful and scary.
Professor David Smith.
The discussions are just so good around this, because what we're seeing is evolutionary change, not disruptive type of changes as we do this. The other thing is we're seeing the new concepts of digital transformation and ubiquitous computing begin to happen with here. It's not just ubiquitous computing, but it's ubiquitous connectivity. Just think today, how many devices, almost any device that has a computer in it. And we're increasingly see that all those devices, which takes power and has a computer in it, is being connected. And that type of universal digitalization, universal computing, and universal connectivity is going to really drive the Web 3.0 evolution as it goes forward. Now, as we've talked about, the entire growth of the Internet of Things, the entire growth of edge computing is going to be there as we get there. You're also going to go back and see that the semantic web, which is allowing machines to decode more and more of the meanings and emotion. And as I said before, the blending of the physical world and the digital world through Web 3.0, as we go more into the middle of the Web 3.0, will be one of its huge defining features. I was last week at a short meeting with one of the leading AI companies in Central Texas that is already pushing the edge of the envelope of merging the physical world and the digital world together, and watching all different types of things interact with each other. And it's going to be amazing. I was blown away to see how on a offshore oil well, using the metaverse technology, using AI, using the Internet of Things type of sensors, you can already today create a pretty seamless environment and have avatars doing a lot of the work. So we're seeing those changes, and Web 3.0 will be the enabler to see more and more of this happen. And it would be built in ways that will make it happen. So that to me is some of the biggest difference, Eric and Jason, is I see going forward with this, is we're going to see that, and how this universal connectivity, the universal computing, the fact that everything's digital will begin to push it. So, you will see in Web 3.0, it's going to become much more efficient because we can combine them. You're going to be able to hopefully, and I know Sharif's experience and mine last night with these storms moving through Central Texas, we want to have interruptible use, but the internet still has challenges many places. You will see access users. And with where we're seeing encryption, where we're seeing applications of all different types of cryptography and distributed ledgers and others, it's going to take control and ownership of their data. And that's going to really affect companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, and others in their Web 3.0, because the data ownership or the lack of data ownership, which they've built a lot of their business model on. Now, there's still challenges for security and trust. And we're going to see that still be a challenge. And Web 3.0, even though we are putting more and more of its own currencies and other things into it, there's still a dependency on real currency to support it as well. So we will see that going forward as works in progress as we transition to Web 3.0 and into the metaverse. So that is where I see it going. And Sharif, many opportunities here for entrepreneurship because of the decentralization. Tremendous opportunities for entrepreneurship, tremendous opportunities for colleges and universities to prepare students to work in this new world where the barriers to entry are so much lower, where you're going to see new organization types evolve because of the ability to integrate the physical world and the digital world. Tremendous opportunities there. So if I'm in a developing nation, I really want to closely follow Web 3.0 as it's emerging. And like I said, it's still in the definitional stage, but there's going to be tremendous entrepreneur activities. tremendous opportunities for nations to put a strategy in place to be able to implement parts of it. So just three fantastic opportunities.
Thank you. Mr. Jason.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll pick right up where you left off on that one, because oracles, right, is kind of was the point I was alluding to about how people verify the proofs and put the proofs in context to find the truth, to find the original provisioner of the media, to find the fact of the issue if there is one, or to even like have the verification of the login credential just for the access or something like that. These are proofs, and that there are huge opportunities. There's a whole changing landscape in terms of the profession of of verifying information, provisioning information like that, and there's room for all forms of structure, all forms of competition, like large and small in this. And yeah, you know, like the pace of development is different. The culture of it is slightly different too, but like there just has not been this phenomenon before where with a few clicks a person is generating thousands of variant images at a time. Just like that, just like automatically generating, or processing, rendering video as quickly as they are and with as high quality as they are. And also like to David's point, ubiquitous connectivity it lends itself to a changing culture and a changing landscape in the professions for the industry, because well, there are a lot of reasons for that, but I'll give a simplistic one. Today's generation is really coming to grips with the cultural ramifications of ubiquitous connectivity, and that people from the former generations, when the telephone was the main connection device, might often sort of joke about, man, I'm so glad that I got through my formative immature phases before there was this permanent digital record of all my opinions. And yeah, convenient, right? Convenient, because there's just a difference. I don't know how to parlay that into like a specific like different profession, but I'll say that the frontier of mental health, for example, and the profession and the industry of being a healthcare provider for the field of mental health is totally different. Is totally different in an age of ubiquitous connectivity. And simultaneously to ubiquitous connectivity, also a higher order of refined information and teased out truth, real truth. Like in the field of mental health, you might want a second opinion. You might want a second opinion from the first opinion that you get. It can stand up to some scrutineering and some proof to say, like, is there a proof that we can rely on that is the dynamic here? So I think it's important to remember that what we build and what technology is supposed to do is make life better and easier for its client side, for its consumer side, and that we get very carried away with ourselves sometimes to say, like, the advancement of technology, it's so exciting that we're going to describe like its complexity in a way that we're excited about it. And it's important for us, especially as important as developers, to remember that if we haven't made life easier and better for the client, that we've missed the point of developing a technology. So all that stuff is definitely there, better and like more convenient. That those vectors are right there, and we'll get there. Let's just stay focused on that, right? Because some of the other stuff can be a little bit distracting, and it is entirely possible to rig up a technological apparatus that is less convenient, that is of lower quality, of lower reliability than before, right? There's the expression to say they don't build them like they used to, and they're referring to long-lasting designs that are sturdy, right? Robust materials and stuff like that. That those are technologies that were built with the right goal and with the user in mind. In the software domain, we should stay there too. So I'll leave those comments just for now.
Thank you. Mr. Eric, what's your concluding remarks for today's session?
Well, we talked about the infrastructure change, which is pretty significant. We talked about the integration, how that infrastructure is tied into how we do business, and can't pull those apart. Then we talked about how people will operate within that infrastructure, some changes of how that's going to change centralization, decentralization, tribes, networks. Very cool stuff. And I think probably the concluding part is probably the largest part of Web 3.0, which is people, the people themselves, the individual components. And one of the challenges with people is that we come in with our current framework, our current lens on how we view the world. Like, all of a sudden people wrote letters, and all of a sudden there's this telegraph. Well, that's just a letter. You have to make it short, but it's just a faster letter, right? Well, now all of a sudden people are coordinating command and control with it. Couldn't do that with a letter very well. It was really slow. And all of a sudden it's a data source. We now have these data networks to get everything from how's the weather there, whatever. People weren't thinking of that. They're just thinking, okay, so now we get used to that. And along comes the phone. Oh, yeah, this is how you use a phone. And so part of the challenge is we're looking at Web 3.0 on the way things are right now. And that's not, they're things that lens are going to change. Someone growing up is going to be very comfortable with a new lens. And a lot of us are still going to be trying to hold on to the way we view the world. And Web 3.0, so when you talk about the metaverse, no, it's, all of a sudden you can have multiple identities and avatars and doing things and business and friendships. The way the lens will have to change. And the other thing is right now we're trying to predict the way people will behave. And I like when the Nobel Prize came out that launched the whole field of behavioral economics, which said, when you come up with those laws and the world, the market will seek to optimize those laws. And you got a Nobel Prize for saying, no, it doesn't. People just don't behave like you expect them to do. So part of it is we move ahead with our current lens, the way things are. And second of all, when presented with these change, there's going to be, people are basically the same, but the way we're going to behave, we don't always behave in our best interest. We don't always do things that are logical. So that is a big can of worms that we don't know about, is how is our lens going to change the way we view? How is this going to change the way we view the world and our lives? And two, when confronted with that, how are we going to behave as people? Because I'm saying there's some big surprises ahead. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're challenging.
Thank you. Professor David Smith, what's your concluding remarks for today?
Well, I'd like to just tap right on. I mean, I love Eric using the phone as an example. And my current one where I kind of love it is when people pick up their smart devices. What do most people call this still? They call it our phone. But if you look at the usages on this smart mobile device, by far the greater uses are not talking on it as though it was a phone. And how many systems are in it? I'm going back to my systems of systems and my conclusion, Dr. Sharif, is that, it's a data source, it's a computing source, it's an accelerometer, it's a GPS, it's a camera, it is a medical device now, it is a payment processing system. It's a sensor. It's I could keep on going for another 5 minutes. All the systems that these smart mobile devices do. Well, guess what? Web 3.0 is going to be just like these smart digital mobile devices because it's the blending of all those same systems of systems together, moving it over to more of a distributed, intelligent web design that is decentralized, that does all the things that the three of us have been talking about. Again, my biggest closing remark is it's still evolving and it's still morphing, and you're going to see this incremental changes to go as it becomes a evolutionary advance in our web technologies. You're going to see the merging of, again, the physical world and the digital world, and that transformation accelerate tremendously because of Web 3.0. We've talked a lot in the past about virtual reality on Web 2.0 and what it can be. Web 3.0 is really where augmented reality will take off more because it is the merging of these worlds. It's where the metaverse goes from being a purely digital world to a combination digital physical world under the metaverse. I was on a call earlier this morning looking at a next generation metaverse-based conferencing system where using augmented reality glasses, you can actually have in-person conferences and metaverse conferences fused together. And it was kind of weird looking at them because one of their concepts is a one eye augmented reality lens, where one eye is the physical part, the other one you see the purely augmented there, so that it doesn't look weird if I'm sitting here shaking Eric's hand and talking to him, watching him through two fully lens augmented reality glasses. Now, how my brain might process that, whole different story. It might be a new thing for therapists to work on for years if that really happens. But again, the biggest concluding remark, Dr. Sharif, is Web 3.0 is going to create new opportunities. It's going to create places where the large incumbent companies are going to be at more of a disadvantage than nimble startups. And particularly as data governance rules change, data ownership, and as the Web 3.0 becomes more and more decentralized, their power is going to decrease more and more to the new entrepreneurship, the new activities, the next generation. And to me, it's an exciting time, particularly for developing nations right now who do not have some of the, well, it's going to be hard to change mindsets that a lot of the developed nations have. So, Sharif, that's my concluding remarks.
Thank you. Mr. Jason, what's your concluding remarks?
Thank you. I think I'll build on that again. I think that I agree with the comments offered so far, truly. And the way the brain interprets the stimulus is just such an amazing thing to appreciate, because we haven't really got to that part of metaverse or Web3 yet, which is the user interface aspect of it, like the screen quality or the AR or the VR, the headphones, the works, right? And that that is part of it too, in that there's a whole threshold of developing those experiences as part of user interface. But I wanted to get to the point that David was really pressing, which was the merging, like the togetherness of the digital realm and the physical realm, and that in the digital realm we get carried away with ourselves and we get sort of dependent. We form dependencies. We substitute one former old dependency to a new, more complicated dependency. And if it's not there for us, then you've seen what happens when a person loses their phone, right? David made a short list of all the things that a phone is to a person. And it's like, that's amazing. It's like the only thing we need. How wonderful. I've got a phone, so I got all my bases covered. But then, whoops, I dropped it in the lake when I went fishing. And now what? I can't find my way home from here, because I don't have a paper map like they used to make. So that's what I mean by technology is supposed to make life easier and safer and better. And that let's try not to get carried away with ourselves with digital means of productivity that we also become dependent on. That's called a progress trap. A progress trap occurs when there's the temptation to move forward and to make the advancement, and maybe now you're faster, maybe now whatever the improvement is, right? And what might not be realized until much later is that you become dependent on that new performance threshold, and that if it's not there for you, that you can't function anymore. So have a backup, or at least have self-awareness about that, about where the progress traps are. Because the truth is, if you look into it, we're sort of surrounded by a lot of progress traps that are catching up with us. And there's about that, they're solvable. They're solvable because just because you dropped your phone in the lake and you can't find your way home without your phone, because your phone is the only place where you're used to finding maps, it doesn't mean you can't get home. It just means you need to figure out how to use or how to find another map, for example. You know what I mean? With what progress traps are, generally speaking. An example would be like the commute. The workforce and the commute is a progress trap, in that the industrial apparatus depends on people in having a certain amount of mobility in order for it to work. And if there's a traffic jam, like a really bad traffic jam, that our whole industrial apparatus cannot function, we have a progress trap there. And I'm sorry, it's not much of a concluding remark to introduce a new concept, but I want to agree with David's point that the physical and digital, they are together already. They already are together. And the question is just, are we making them work well together? Right? Because when they're not working well together, they always are together. One always comes from the other, and they always feed back into each other. But when they're working well together, that's when we're delivering our design goal, I feel. Better safety, better redundancy. Yeah, it makes life easier. Technology should make life easier and better.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for joining today's session. Definitely we have to do more research on Web3. We need to develop our more infrastructure, especially for the emerging economy. And beside that, we need more collaboration from developed world. And through this process, maybe we can develop this Web3 and we can move forward. Thank you, Mr. Eric, Professor David Smith, and Mr. Jason for your continuous support for World Talent Economy Forum. I request all of our audience, please share our content with your government agency, corporation, and academy. Thank you. Bye-bye and take care.